The silence hit me first. Not the peaceful kind you hope for when you step into the woods, but the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up before your brain even catches on. I was standing at the edge of what should have been our campsite, holding my 10-year-old daughter's hand, staring at nothing. Nothing. The tents, the cars, the food, the chairs, the fire pit we built just hours earlier gone. Wiped clean like it had never existed. "Mom, where is everyone?" Lily's voice cracked. She looked so small in those pink hiking boots I'd bought her for this trip, the ones she'd been showing off to the other kids. I swallowed hard, forcing air through a throat that felt like sandpaper. "It's okay, honey. Maybe they went for a walk," even though I knew I was lying. The truck tracks were still pressed into the dirt. The grass was still flattened where our tent had stood. This was our spot, no mistake about it. And yet, we were standing in an empty clearing. Then I saw it. A sheet of paper weighed down by a rock on the picnic table. My stomach dropped before I even picked it up. It was Michael's handwriting. Claire, it read, "This is for the best. Trust me, one day you'll understand. Take care of yourself." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just a man's neat little script cutting me out of his life like I was a loose thread he'd finally snipped. I wanted to crumble right there. How do you explain to your child that her father abandoned her in the wilderness? How do you make sense of something that makes no sense at all? But Lily's hand squeezed mine, her eyes wide and searching, and I knew falling apart wasn't an option. "There's been a change of plans, baby," I said, steady as I could. "Looks like it's just you and me now." She looked around confused. "But where's Dad and Mr. Lewis and Mr. Harper and their families?" That hit harder than the note. These weren't strangers. These were people I'd let into my home whose kids had played with mine, who'd smiled at me across the fire just last night. And all the while, they'd been plotting to drive off and leave us for dead. For a moment, the betrayal was so sharp, it made me stagger. I had to grip the edge of that table to keep from falling. But Lily tugged my sleeve again. "Mom, you're scaring me." I forced myself upright. I could fall apart later. Right now, I had to figure out how to keep us alive. I pulled out my phone, already knowing no signal. We were at least 20 miles from the nearest road. The ranger station was farther. The sun was dropping the air, cooling, and all we had were 2 granola bars, a water bottle, and a child's backpack with a book inside. And yet, somewhere deep inside, under all the fear, something hard and sharp began to take shape. "Do you remember those stories Grandpa used to tell?" I asked Lily, kneeling to meet her eyes, about people living in the woods with just what they carried. She nodded, still nervous but curious. "Well, that's us now. And when we get out of here, and we will, we're going to be stronger than ever." That night, under the darkening canopy, I built our first shelter with nothing but branches and pine needles. My hands blistered, my arms ached. But when Lily crawled inside and whispered, "It's like a fort," I knew we had a fighting chance. We shared half a granola bar and sipped water, sitting close by the tiny fire. I somehow managed to coax to life by grinding wood until my palms bled. When Lily asked softly, "Is Dad coming back?" I bit down on my tongue until I tasted blood. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, staring into the flames. "He's not." And I knew then this wasn't just abandonment. This was murder in disguise. Michael wasn't planning to come back with search parties. He wanted us gone, and I'd be damned if I let him win. The days that followed turned into lessons. Shelter, water, fire, food, one step at a time. Lily learned fast. She laughed when our lean-to collapsed. She beamed when we caught our first fish, using nothing but a sharpened stick and a bit of thread from her jacket. Every time she cheered, I felt a piece of myself stitch back together. The woman Michael had spent years convincing she wasn't strong enough. She was back, and stronger. At night, lying beside my daughter under our makeshift roof, I stared up through the branches and replayed every sign I'd missed. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the way Natalie Harper had hovered near him, whispering, touching his arm. The camping trip he'd insisted on saying I needed to get out of my comfort zone. Comfort zone, no. He'd been setting the stage for my disappearance. And I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to drag us out of that forest walk back into town with my head high and tear his perfect little plan to shreds. By the fourth day, Lily and I had a rhythm. She gathered kindling. I smoked strips of fish for storage. She identified wild onions and dandelions. I tested mushrooms in small bites to make sure they were safe. My daughter, just 10 years old, started a fire on her own. She grinned ear to ear, holding up her hands smeared with soot. "Look, Mom, I did it." "You're amazing," I told her, and I meant it. The thing Michael never understood, he thought I was weak, but he didn't realize I had someone worth fighting for. On the 7th day, we found the trail, a clear, beaten path leading northeast. I knew it had to end at the main road. "Are we ready?" I asked Lily, adjusting the woven basket we'd made to carry food. "Ready," she said, gripping her walking stick like a soldier. 4 hours later, we stumbled onto asphalt. Civilization. A ranger truck appeared not 20 minutes after, and when the man jumped out, his jaw nearly hit the ground. "You're Claire Thompson and your daughter?" he asked. "Yes," I said simply. "Ma'am, there's been a massive search. Your husband's been on the news for days begging for help. Everyone thought—" He shook his head. 7 days out here." "How did you—" "We managed," I cut in. My voice was flat, steady. My husband was wrong about a lot of things. At the station, EMTs swarmed us, reporters snapped photos. Police scribbled down notes. I smiled politely, gave them the version they wanted. We went for a walk. We got lost. We survived on instincts. I didn't mention the note. Not yet. When they said Michael was on his way, I asked to call my sister instead. "I'd rather see family first," I explained. And when Amanda picked up, I whispered the truth. "He abandoned us on purpose. I have proof. Don't tell anyone we're alive until you get here." The look on Michael's face when he arrived and learned we'd already left with my sister, that was the first crack in his armor. The next days were a blur of strategy. Amanda and I gathered evidence: his attempts to access life insurance, his new life with Natalie already moving into my house, his crocodile tear interviews. The man was so certain he'd won, he got sloppy. And when the papers were served, divorce, custody, frozen assets. His frantic voicemails told the story better than I ever could. They started sweet, then turned manipulative, then flat out threatening. I saved every single one. By the time I sat across from prosecutors handing them the note, the financial records, and his messages, I felt like steel. "This is attempted murder fraud conspiracy," they said. "I know," I answered, "and I'm ready." The day they arrested him, I went to the jail just to look him in the eye. Behind the glass, he looked smaller, weaker. "Claire," he croaked. "Thank God you came." "I can explain." I lifted the phone, stared straight into his eyes. "You spent years convincing me I couldn't survive without you. Turns out the only thing I couldn't survive was being married to you." He flinched, scrambling for excuses. Natalie's idea, a mistake. He thought I'd find help sooner. I dropped the phone back on the hook and walked away while he shouted after me, nothing but noise. Months later, Lily and I were in a new town in a small house we'd chosen ourselves. She was thriving, taking karate, building tree houses with friends proud of her survival scars. I'd started my own consulting business using the same grit that got us through the forest to help others solve problems. One night, she curled up beside me and whispered, "Mom, I'm glad we went camping. Not the part where Dad left, but the part where we learned how strong we are. I kissed her forehead, tears stinging my eyes. Me too, baby. Me too. Michael thought he was writing the end of my story, but he only wrote the beginning of a new one. Now let me ask you, what do you think if someone betrays their family this deeply? Do they deserve a second chance? Or should the law crush them without mercy? And have you ever seen someone underestimated, only to rise stronger than anyone imagined? Tell me in the comments, because this isn't just my story. It's about every person who's ever been left for dead and chose to fight back.